seed heads on it. We like to pick them when they're just kind of nicely flowering, but not got old like that.
You pick them on a specific day?
You can pick them on a specific day that's, yeah, on a flower day, yes. But often you're picking because you've got time to go out. Well, on my small scale that I do, I have these just growing in amongst my vegetable garden outside my back door, and I tend to pick them just as I'm walking past and see the flowers, and I've got my drying rack just inside, so I keep up with the flowers in the garden, and particularly with some like the chamomile, which is the next one. I always just pick those as soon as they sort of come out, and they're still nice and fresh. Likewise dandelion. So this one, you save up the flowers, picking the flowers, and Katrina's got some up there, if you can see just that sort of net container there. She's got some in there. And this one is put into, we re-wet it, but this is a dried, what I have dried, a bladder from a stag. And I have to say it's a pretty small example. I'm going to get some more in this next season, but...
How do you get hold of that? Just from hunters or things like that?
Well, that's really your main way, other than if you have a connection, which I have, that
I got a nephew that worked from a deer farm.
Yeah, so yeah, but they do, I guess they do a bit of venison home kill, do they? Yeah, it's from your home kill. But home kill people, you have to be there at the time, at the day they're doing it, and ready to, with your own bucket and your own knife and things. They don't generally want to take any time for you. So this is a nice, ideally it is, yes. So that's where some of these things, are not like easy, because that's not something you can easily get hold of.
How many times can you utilise?
It breaks down because these are then this is filled with the dried flowers. I usually re-moisten them just as I stuff them into here, make a hole, and just cut this bit off, and then stuff the flowers in and tie it up. And then this one actually, you're not going to remember all these details, so don't worry. If you want to make the preparations, just be in touch, and can guide you through or direct you to all the things, the books and that have instructions on making the preparations. But I'm just giving you a little idea of things. So the qualities of the yarrow, which is very much, that's a very good diuretic, or making your liver flow. It just helps things flow, and likewise the bladder is very much in the realm of flowing, things that flow, collect and move on. And Rudolf Steiner talks about this cosmic connection that a stag, of course, has got these beautiful antlers that are dividing, and it's like it's already connected with the heavens. That's why Father Christmas says reindeer, because it's like already knows its way around the sky. It's connected with the heavens. And also it's very light on its feet. They're very nervy sort of animal, and so this lightness, this is the divided leaves that are almost like the shape of little antlers there. They're divided up like that, often called Venus's eyebrows. This plant was called by the Europeans, I gather. And Venus is such a planet of light, the brightest star. I saw that out there this morning. The moon was conjunct with Venus in the morning sky, and then just a little bit below, I kind of knew to look for them, was Mars and then Mercury. So those 4 planets were there just at 6 a.m. I saw them this morning. Yeah, very nice. So yeah, that's about things that flow, but it also helps the whole sulfur process, and sulfur itself is about process, I guess. Sulfur and the potassium process. All of these, where you can see we're putting tiny amounts in. It's not like it's a solid material quantity that we're adding. It's about the capacity to carry out a process, and to connect that process with all the helping forces of the whole cosmos. So the next one is chamomile flowers that are put into a piece of intestine from a cow. And yeah, so I mean, these are the parts are actually what I got my friend to send up from home this weekend. So yeah, that's a piece of small intestine. Again, I was there at the home kill. You cut off the bits you want. I cut off several lengths like this, and then inflate them, hang for a day when they dry, and then just deflate them a bit for storage. But you know, the intestine is naturally twisting around. It's lovely forms, but this is just because, I mean, ideally again you would make them fresh at the time, but usually we make them in the autumn time and put them down in the soil in the winter, these preparations. And but you know, people are having a home kill at all sorts of times of the year, and you just take what you can. But drying them, I find a very convenient way of storing and reusing them. So
may I ask, do you wash them with anything in particular when you're cleaning out?
No, the bladders never need washing. And funny thing, small intestine, the number of times I've collected, you know that they're eating grass at this end, and there's definitely dung coming out the other end, and you see that in the large bowel. And the small intestine, I've never found any grass in it. It's like, and it's not green coloured. It's always pink. You might just squeeze it a little bit and a bit of this pink juiciness comes out. But
Chemical reaction as it gets down into that lower.
I don't know if it just goes so quickly through the small intestine, or
Could already be regurgitated too.
Yes, there's quite a bit of processes happen, but then further down you do see the greenness, and then it comes out as
I remember
green.
cleaning those as a child and had to eat them.
Oh, really?
Call them teko.
Yeah.
And yeah, we used to chop them up and clean them, rinse them out, turn them inside out, and then roast them and eat them. Yeah, they were like our tippies.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes.
Better than paka paka, which is the crackle off the pig.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if you said it or not, but do you, when you collect them, would you put the flowers inside it and then let it dry together, or
Well, no, when you,
time?
all of these, well, this one you usually hang it in the tree over you fill it with the flowers in the springtime, hang it in a tree, in a sort of a light tree. I put in a silver birch tree over the summer, and then in the winter time bury them in the soil. So they all go through a composting during the winter. That's the other ones. This one, we basically fill it on the day you're going to bury it. So you're having your dried flowers, which is that's chamomile is the next one. I've picked these flowers here that only to remind you of chamomile. If you've seen the plant that's chamomile, this is actually what we call stinking mayweed, and they look very similar, but there's ways of telling them apart. I mean, chamomile always, if in New Zealand, it's pretty well always flowering in October and November, whereas this flowers a bit later. And also the form, it's a bit more tufty. And then the final test, if you think you'll make a cup of chamomile tea with this, just taste one of these flowers. It's so yucky. So stinking mayweed, it has that name, stinking mayweed, because it's pretty stinky and it tastes horrible. So
It doesn't smell like chamomile at all?
not really, no. So it's very much a look-alike, and I've you know, sometimes it comes up in the garden, and you know, you kind of leave it for a little while to see which it is, but yeah, I can tell. Yeah, so just, quickly going through the rest of the preparations, because they're following a bit of a pattern, as you see. That was the yarrow one with the bladder, and then next one chamomile flowers and the intestine. The next one is 504, is the stinging nettle, which is we use a bigger the European stinging nettle, because it grows quite readily. It's a good size, it's perennial. It keeps, if it's in a shady place, yeah, Debbie's got some over under a tree there that's growing not badly, and there's an example of it in the pot over here. Yeah, some stinging nettle there. That's Urtica dioica. So in India we use another Urtica that grows in the lower Himalayas very prolifically. It's quite a bushy one like this, and we have made some from the New Zealand onga onga, which is Urtica ferox, of course. It's a very big bush, and as you know, the stings are, you know, need to be super cautious. Get a sting and you can feel it. Well, I know someone who got a sting, and you feel it right into your bone and up for a whole week, sort of thing. It's quite a strong sting on that nettle. So this European one, you know, you can brush your arms through it. And
do you have anything particularly that you put that in as well?
That one isn't. No, you put a pile. I usually dry the nettle and then compact it into either a clay-fired flower pot, or what they used to have, the drainage tiles, the clay drainage tiles, and bury it in the soil. And that one, in fact, it stays in the ground for a whole year. So that's the nettle, and that works very much with the iron qualities, iron strength, and that you know, the greenness of the leaves, magnesium in the leaves, and so on. So 504, I could, yeah, and that, you know, that real presence that you get from the nettle is so kind of, it gives the soil the ability to know what the plants around it are needing. And you know, as part of this picture of just, you grow something in the soil and it finds what it needs, or it can even kind of make it, or in combination with the soil life. 504, and then there's one that's made from oak bark, usually done off the English oak tree, where there's big thick bark and there's enough to sort of rasp off a bit of sawdust from the bark. You kind of rasp off the sawdust, collect that on a sheet or something under, or someone's holding something for you, and that one is put into the brain cavity of a bovine or a goat, sheep or goat. So that's a bit of a process. Again, you best have to be there at the time of the home kill and be prepared for emptying that brain out of the cavity and getting your oak bark and filling it all in. And yeah, I've got a friend who's got oak trees and a swamp there, so we can do it all in one day. Grating the oak bark, prepare the skull a bit, so take some of the fleshiness off, and put the oak bark in and bury it in the swamp, because this one stays wet for 6 months in the ground over the winter, and it's going through it's kind of, when you lift it, it's gone through quite a smelly sort of process. There's been a bit of raw flesh on it still, but a lot of that's rotted down, or eels have picked it off. And so that one. So again, it's very much related to the calcium process. When Rudolf Steiner talked about this preparation, he said that it's like a general panacea for plant diseases. It's working in a way where it's holding the moisture in check, so that your plants are they're not growing in sort of an overly humid environment. It's reducing that humidity down to keeping the moisture sort of in the earth where it needs to be. And
need it now.
Yeah, yes. So it's very much involved with the calcium process, and the calcium is always about hardening of things. So the whole process from the phloem or the cambium out to the outer part of the plant is the formation of bark. And so those living cells of the cambium quickly they develop their cell walls, and then the cell walls become a sort of cork layer, and then lignin with the formation of bark. So the living contents have actually gone, but it's formed something. Any tree you look at, and once you get to know them, you can identify it by its bark. So the essence of oak tree or totara or whatever the tree is expressed in its bark, even though it's dead. And you know that it is an expression. And so that calcium process that's working there in the skull, obviously the skull itself is a calcium form, but also the process of thinking in itself, the thoughts of the world already exist. They're out there, and we've got this thing here that can take a thought that lives in, you might say, the eternal world. It can come in, and we've got this brain that can turn it into something that we can think with our brains and hold it and remember it. Because a sign of having a really spiritual thought, in my experience, is that it's like, oh, now I've got it, wow, and this lovely feeling, and then you see it just disappearing up the vacuum cleaner pipe as you come back into yourself. It's usually in a moment of real interest in something, and you're out of yourself, you're in there, and something reveals itself, and then as you just so loving that you've found that, it's gone. Maybe there's some little remnant or something comes back another time, but it's so this thing of having this brain that can, again, it's sort of a calcium process that can take a true thought, a true being, process it in a way that we can understand it, remember it, and hold it in our human form. And that calcium is very likely involved in that process. If you looked at the physiology, that's where science could be so exciting, if you were to be looking at what's going on inside the brain, and you found that calcium was there, and you saw some calcium process going on. You're like, oh wow, so that is what's helping hold these thoughts. But if you just find that in absence, it's like, oh yeah, okay, might have some medical significance or something. But anyway, just these these bigger pictures. That's the oak bark, and then we've got the dandelion, and a number of you will know dandelion plant. Here's some flowers here again from Katrina, that she had some dried dandelion flowers, because we save the dandelion flowers, and that one's actually put into a piece of mesentery from a cow, and oops, didn't mean to do that. Can be a bit brittle, but when you slaughter an animal, there's a lining to the whole abdominal cavity. There's usually little bits of, a few bits that connect it kind of to the organs, and then more of this sort of stuff connects, and holds all the intestines in their position, and so. But this comes out as a fairly large flat sheet. It can be that big, and ideally it's from an animal that's not so fat. I used to get them from where there was a dairy cow that had sort of finished its life, and whereas if you get a home kill, it's usually a beast that's been fattened for meat, and so this piece can be quite fatty as part of that, getting a fat animal. But you can see as it's wetted, as you use it, this can stretch into quite a big piece, and you can wrap quite a bundle of flowers inside that and do it up with string, make a nice little package like you're sending it off to the post shop, and put that into the ground. So that's just
For how long?
Pardon?
For how long?
That's put into the ground again for about 6 months. 6 months over the winter time.
So this is a very, very busy season.
Yes, the autumn is quite a busy time, and it's just coming up. Yeah, so needs a bit of planning. Yeah, so that in the area where you kind of feel butterflies in your stomach, or a bit nervous about something you have to do today, that's kind of lots of nerves in that area, quite sensitive, and likewise the dandelion has a certain sensitivity or connection with the whole kind of silica and the fine silica in the atmosphere, and there's quite some connections there. And it was when Rudolf Stein was talking about this preparation in dandelions that he said, if you fertilize your fields in this way, like using all these, the plants get what they need, not only from the soil around their roots, but from the neighbouring fields and even the neighbouring forest. And he wasn't talking about mycorrhizal fungi, but again, science now can label the DNA right here by this plant and see that the same actual DNA, same fungus, is way over there 200 metres or more away. So that kind of confirms this picture of, what I call the world-wise web, the underground connections of the whole soil processes, the living soil, and that through what we're bringing here, if you do analyse these preparations, as a number of soil laboratories people have done, you'll find that each contains a sort of certain range of beneficial soil bacteria and fungi. And together, we always use these ones together as a family. So it's like this family makes up that huge biodiversity with these processes, life processes that are complementing each other. And this last one, the valerian, which we've got some plants up there, and those are the flowers of valerian. Valerian, and we make it as a sort of vinegar flower, fresh flowers covered with water, let it ferment for a week, and then strain the liquid off and put it in a bottle. It keeps very well for, if you've got the lid kept on, for they've got some several years old. Just smells lovely. And dilute it a bit, and then this, either stirring it for 5 minutes or a bit of this sort of potentized kind of shaking of it just to wake it up. But valerian medicinally is used for that, forming a skin, you might say, or a barrier. Each of these in a way is related to a planetary process too, and this is related to Saturn. Saturn is the planet that remembers, but it's also the one, you know, it can have a bit of a bad name in astrology because, you know, difficult things happen, but it's because it's kind of, we all try to avoid the issues that we came into this life to have to overcome, and then Saturn says, well, you know, after a while you actually have to go through the eye of the needle and do that and come out the other side and you know, recover from it or whatever with renewed strength. But Saturn is the outermost of the visible planets in the solar system, and it's kind of that skin between the planetary process within and the great starry realm beyond. So that's our 7 preparations, and yeah, that's used medicinally as a calming and sedative sort of thing. So again, a child who's super excited and out of themselves, you grab them up in a blanket and they scream and struggle for a bit, and eventually they kind of stop and maybe go to sleep, but you know, and then you can let them go and they're back inside their skin. So it's got that quality of bringing you back inside your skin, holding a calmness there. So that's a picture of those preparations, and that they work, I said about this sort of going between, but the heavens and the earth. Could you pass me those horns there? And well, yeah, and one of the smaller ones, and then that silica crystal, and behind there's a bottle called 500. Yeah. So we make two other preparations that are like the heavens and the earth, with this working between, Ranganui Papatuanuku, and the weaving in between. So there's one preparation that's made from pounding and grinding up silica crystals. Usually you can get this is a beautiful one, and you probably wouldn't want to do that with that one, but you can get the smaller crystals that, you know, when they're preparing them for the rock shop sort of thing, they take off some of the outer ones or smaller little bits, and you can crush those up into a powder that's put into a cow horn, which is then put in the soil over the summer months. And that's really, it's used very much for the light and the strength of the leaves, good plant health, good flavour, good keeping quality. It's the one that the BD wine people love because it gives a high Brix level in the grapes, and it gives that real depth of terroir, connecting it with its full environment through the horn preparation. So that's the horn summer preparation that's connecting with the whole heavens, the leaves, the upper part of the plant, and then we make one that is from cow manure that is put in the horns, that's put into the ground in the winter months, and during that time it goes, its own little composting process goes on inside. At the end you lift it out, give it a tap, and usually it'll come out quite easily, this nice piece of transformed cow manure with these little white mycorrhizal fungi on the outside, and on the inside of the horn it's very alive, quite a nice sweet smell. It's totally humusy forest floor sort of smell. It's very lovely, and that's working very much with the soil and the earth quality, the crystal one with the light. You can see it glinting in the light, working with the light and the upper part of the plant, the green leaves, the photosynthesis process, the whole burst of, when you use that sort of burst of stimulation of photosynthesis and a feeding of carbon. All trees and plants are sort of feeding this wonderful life in the soil. A lot of the sugars produced in the leaves are actually fed through the roots to the microorganisms in the soils, because it's such a mutually beneficial relationship between them.
What do you block the bottom of the horns up with?
Well, the horn, when you use the powder, that was a little bit tricky. Well, it's not tricky. You'd usually just mix the powder with water, so it's kind of like a dough, and put that in, and then you can turn it upside down without it falling out. And the cow dung will likewise, that stays in fairly easily. I don't usually cap them with anything. I just put them into the soil in the pit, so that they've got soil at least 8 inches to 8 inches of soil above the horns, depending where you are and which country. In India we put them a bit deeper, just because to try and hold the moisture and the even temperature a bit further down in the soil. The horns you can, yes, they last for several years. A lovely horn like that would probably give you at least 7 or 10 years. One like that's flaking off, I don't know how much that's been used, obviously. I'm not sure how many times. It's quite a while, but well, again, I use my metal thing with the piston in it to crush it up to a sort of sand, and then I've got a tray of plate glass and another piece of plate glass like blackboard duster, and sort of swirl it around like that. Makes an awful blackboard screeching noise to start with, and then till it goes to like talcum powder, a nice swishing sound. Always use a mask and earplugs, but you don't want to breathe in the silica dust. So these preparations, the horn preparations, are always used as a field preparation. They just spread it over your whole bit of land, and always do this soil one we do in the afternoon. In the evening, as the day is coming to rest and the dew starts to fall, we're going to stir that tonight after tea here at 7 o'clock. And then the silica one, which we'll do tomorrow morning, we stir it early, so that we're just putting it on just as the sun's rising, so that'll be an earlier start for one or two of us. And that one, the morning when the mists are rising and everything's rising up, you might say, the energy's rising, the upper part of the leaves are all coming to meeting the light again on a new day. So we've got these two, and the weaving between of those, and it's almost like this sort of healing staff of Mercury, this which is a symbol from the Greeks, I think, of Mercury the healer, and it's this single staff, and then this weaving of these two snakes around this staff. But you could see this kind of weaving process, a sixness there, and there's so many symbols that can represent this, and that's what I love about the Huaparakori, that symbol is just likewise such a picture of, I don't know if it's in here, but I've seen it somewhere lately, including yesterday. But that lovely one with the colours, and you've got on the upper part, it's like all these coming to leaf, and the central white one that really connects to the heavens, and then the central one going down and kind of this lovely holding gesture of the earth, and then the coloured ones at the side that are kind of forming like the plant between the heavens and the earth. And so it's all about this connectedness with between the heavens and the earth, and the weaving quality in between. So we've made the CPP, and the obvious question is, what are you going to use it for? Okay, so once you've got this material, that's when it's ready after 3 months, there's a bit again from a tiny bit from Katrina that you can pass around if you like it, but you know, obviously getting this out of the pit by the bucketful. Yeah. So I usually use it as take a good amount in my hands like this, put it in a bucket of water. I'd probably use a 20 litre bucket. This is a 10 litre bucket. Stir it up this way and that way for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then I especially use it when putting out new seedlings. Just sort of take it in a yogurt pot or something, kind of half a cup of this per seedling down the row if you're small. For you know, just putting in your half dozen seedlings, or a smaller number if you're doing big long rows, then you can use a brush like, excuse me a moment, one of these, we've got some brushes just over here, a hearth brush kind of thing. This is actually our hand washing water here, but you know, if you've got some little seedlings or just some plants, you're just sprinkling it around and it goes on the leaves and the soil. You're just directing it downwards, but you know, reasonably, in a reasonably heavy amount. You can direct the brush quite well, so if you've got a row of seedlings or freshly germinated seeds, you're just going along the row and kind of sprinkling it on. It's a good amount. It can be good for the upper part of the plant as well as the soil. So applying 500, it can be used for so many things. It stimulates the leaf growth. It's got, again from testing, it's got the highest level of gibberellic acid of any of the composts or the other preparations, or 500, very high in gibberellic acid, and which is not surprising to those who've been using it for years, because it's great for stimulating the roots on your cuttings, and it stimulates when you transplant your seedlings, it really stimulates the new root growth, so that they're standing up bright and happy the next morning. You'll get away with just watering them in, and then, you know, whereas sometimes you find you put seedlings in and you have to water them every day or twice on the first day, and then every day for a week before they kind of find their feet again. You want them to just do that straight away and not have that transplant shock. So that's a good use for it. We mix it with, make a tree paste that is really popular with, it's basically, and again, you know, if you want the recipes or things or direction to books, I can tell you later, but it's equal parts of fresh cow manure, high silica sand of some sort, a river sand preferably, and cow dung sand and clay, so clay that's been got to a workable level. You mix those into a nice pasty consistency, and then some You can put in, yeah, I usually put in quite a good amount of this CPP into that, just in its solid form. You can stir it first and add the whole, and that can be part of your water content, but CPP mixed into it. There's a few other things that people add for particular situations, you know, equisetum and orchard situations and things. So but that's just pasted on the tree, and it really, on the trunk of the tree and the lower limbs that you can reach, and it really stimulates the cambium layer under the bark. And so that's so good for the health of the plant. And also if there's you know, damage to the tree trunk, or where you've done pruning, to apply it straight after pruning. It helps with very good healing and covering of your pruning cuts.
And when are you meant to do that?
I usually do that in the autumn.
And it has to be fresh cow food, and it can't sit
Yeah, you know, so it's mixable. I mean, with cow dung, like for today, we could have been collecting it over the last week and just collecting it each day when it was fresh in the morning, and then just piling it up somewhere and covered with a damp sack, and that would be keep it, although it's a week old, it would keep it nice and in good condition. Yep. So I've talked a lot. Are there any questions or comments? And then we'll see who wants to come over and put this into the pit, whether we do that now or in the cool of the evening. We'll see.
I have lots of questions, but I'll ask you later.
Okay.
So the silica for that corn, that's going in for 6 months. Was that?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it didn't fix that much.
Yes, it goes in for 6 months over the summer.
So, given all of that, do you personally prepare those compost preparations, or you know, like if you were doing it, say for the oak bark, how many of those would you do to cover your garden growth for the year? Like, how much do you?
Well, if for my own sort of use in the odd workshops that I do, I would use one scull every second or third year,
Right. Okay.
because I don't need an awful lot, and you know, one, probably a slightly bigger bladder than that, but one of those a year. The sausages would be maybe 3 of bits of that sort of length would be the amount. Oak, the stinging nettle is fairly easy to collect a good amount and stuff it into a few flower pots and put it in the ground, and that breaks down a great deal, so it comes out just a small volume.
Stinging nettle,
Am I not?
drying it first.
Yes, I usually dry it first. Just if it's fresh and you put it, especially in a wide pot, you might get, it might go through that slimy stage as it breaks down, you know, things that get like lawn clippings. So at least half of it being pre-dried, maybe add a bit of fresh as well. But
How long do they actually last? So if
well stored, and I've got a box that's in my shed which is sort of happens to be sort of partly underground, so against the wall that's kind of underground. They sit there in a box with that's actually 2 layers, and between the layers there's peat between those layers. So but otherwise it's like a drum like that you've filled with some peat from or coconut fibre from the plant shop, and you kind of put your containers into it, and that helps. So the main thing is to hold stability of temperature, so you don't get condensation inside your containers as the temperature goes up and down. And yeah, and then even temperature, and I mean, you know, how do we protect anything these days? There's so much radiation of one sort or another, but possibly that peat maybe reduces it a bit. I've heard of people who wear peat singlets when they fly on planes because it apparently reduces the radiation or some effects you get from, but you can buy peat singlets in Europe apparently.
Thank you so much. It's been a real eye-opener. Like you, at the end of all of this, I too wonder how Rudolf Steiner actually discovered what worked with what.
Yeah. He was a person...
Observation.
Yeah, observation, people he met. He often referred to a very influential meeting he had with a herb grower in his early 20s, a man who obviously still held some of that connectedness or that knowing between, well, the whole sort of whole greater environment, including the starry realms, and the growing of plants and the nature of herbs and what healings brought what. And so they sat next to each other on the bus one day when this man had these big bags of herbs he was taking into the local pharmacy back in the 1920s. This was, and so they got talking, but it was a meeting where, you know, that obviously extended, and so that was a big step. But then, you know, Rudolf Steiner, he had this, one of his first jobs was editing the whole works of Goethe, who had lived in Germany, died, I don't know, 40 or so years before Rudolf Steiner was born. And he's more known for his sort of poetry and plays, but a profoundly spiritual person of those sort of times, and his whole way he looked at nature, and just that seeing that pattern that is absolutely universal with the rising of the sun in the morning, the heat of the sun in the day, the dying in the afternoon, that every incarnation of a day is the same as every incarnation of a life, a birth in the morning. In the middle of life there's all these chaos that goes on, and children come and you're all busy with this and that, and then as you have this period of reflecting and remembering, and you're almost gathered up into the arms of Hinenui Tipo, and this essence, that what you're carrying from that life that's nurtured through to a new birth in the following life or the following morning or whatever, that sort of, and that the whole growth of a plant from a seed through those first leaves, through the young leaves at such a leafy lush stage, and then pushing up these flower heads as we see there or here, and the leaves becoming much sparser and more pointed as you come up the plant, and then bursting into this totally new form of the flower, and then the warmth quality that comes in with the formation of the seeds and fruits in some cases. Seeds and fruits. So just seeing the elements that work with you've got this little seed that's in the realm of the soil, the earth element, the leaves, very lush and watery, that's the water element, and then the flowers where we come into it's lifted up into the realm of air and light. All the colour comes, all the flowers are coloured, there's much lightness, they're up there, there's bees, there's breezes, there's butterflies, and there's the aroma of flowers that's very much in that earthy realm. And then the seeds and fruits, you know, the absolutely classic case in India is this mango that forms, and it's the absolute sweetness and ripeness and goldenness of that mango is so much related to the warmth and the heat element. So, yep. So
brilliant. I loved it. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're most...
How you explained it all for us.
Right.
This was much better than the books I've got.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's living. It's living, isn't it? And that's one of the big things Rudolf Steiner said one time. You must stay within the living realm. You know, life has so much capacity, and when at one point he said, when he was talking about all these things like this, and he said, well, you farmers are wondering when I'm going to talk about nitrogen, because that's what you all want to know. He said, in fact, I've been talking about it all the time. If we fertilize the soil in this way, the soil can either through these networks find what it needs, but actually it can, he talked about biological transmutation of elements, which, you know, that from calcium and magnesium in the soil, that those can even be transmuted into nitrogen, and nitrogen formed in that way has this amazing power. So we're giving the soil the capacity to do what it knows it can do, but we have to be that kind of intermediary that says, yes, go for it. We know you can. The wisdom that lives in the soil. And I mean, there were many scientists, there were French scientists in the, whenever it was, the end of the 1700s, who were doing experiments with feeding chickens, and there was this much calcium in the diet, and there was this much calcium in the eggs they produced. It's like they weren't getting enough in the diet for what they produced. And then things like lobsters that, you know, go and hide behind a rock for 3 days, they shed their old skin that doesn't fit, and they sit there and they come out with a brand new one. So they test the calcium in the blood before the 3 days, and there's definitely no way as the amount that is in that shell when they walk out 3 days later. So, you know, they were talking about biological transmutation then, but it's not something that current science accepts or talks about, because they can't reproduce it in a test tube. It happens in living systems. The moment you look at something, disturb it enough to be able to look and measure, then you've destroyed the capacity to do it. So no, they can't find it. It's not there.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you very much for tō kōrero. So he mihi nui tēnei kia koe whaia mo tō kōrero mo tātou ngā iwi o te hau kāinga me ngā iwi haere mai ki tēnei rā. So just to say thank you very much. But what you've said reminds me of an old proverbial saying that they used to say that was passed down from my tupuna, and it was went something like kore momo, nā te momo ka ora ai te tangata. So what that saying is that any waste, and that brings back life to the land and to everybody, so everybody benefits from it. So that's what that saying means. So just listening, it reaffirms a lot of what you're saying through another kaupapa, through Rudolf Steiner and other people that scientifically investigated the things of the soil, you know, te whenua. I think Rehua is like our study of the stars, which helps us also with, you know, understanding the format and the maramataka through things. That's what our rangatira said over there earlier. So, you know, I just wanted to, you know, just say thank you very much for, you know, encouraging this kaupapa throughout our whānau katoa and Aotearoa, because we all need to know something that we naturally come from and that we naturally should be doing.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
Koe whaia, he mihi nui tēnei kia koe me tō wōhoa te reira. Kia ora, anyway. Ka nui tēnei, kia ora whaia.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yes, when you ask about, you know, who was this Rudolf Steiner, I think it's like the wisdom of the world is in the world. It exists, and, you know, as you know, it's living there still. And just someone who, through his experiences from previous lives perhaps or whatever, in this life Pierre was able to, came with the questions, how can I know this world? And a lot of it is this observation, and also developing his faculties to observe at a deeper level. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So we didn't complete the CPP into its pit, but that will happen, and another time we'll encourage Graham to get a pit on his own property here. For ease
So there's no pit for that?
There's a pit over by the kindergarten that we'll use for this
I was going to say
particular
you
one.
could bring it to Mototau if you want.
Oh, right. Well, I mean, that's a negotiable thing too, I would say. Well, we'll just, could you pass that towel over there, please? We will put it in the shade, but that's the other thing. Over at the pit, these preps would all be put into the dung and covered over, and then we'll wet this towel, and usually it's a jute sack. You make friends with your local coffee shop, buy a few coffees, and you might get some coffee sacks from them. And you wet that, and then we'll put a shade and rain cover over the whole lot and hold it down with concrete blocks and some more bricks. So we'll put this in the shade for now to keep that all cool.
I could do it. Where would you like me to take?
Oh, I'd say just over there for the moment, although the sun is going to move round, so perhaps it would be better under here, under the tutara trees.
Just one final question. I know I've asked so many. This is all such a journey for me today.